Take your hands off me. Touch me again.
Don't touch her,
me.
Don't touch her,
Touch me again.
But she's immediately saying something worse. Forget the actions women can take. Are women even allowed to exist anymore? This is what her side represents. It is so radical to not even be able to formulate the word woman because you feel too scared, because you need to accommodate all of these various genders.
You'd find this stuff online. Your employer, you couldn't get hired. This guy got right.
Oh, this guy.
That used to be that used.
In the classroom, he's having this guy spank him. Check this out.
This is the Burbank?
This is the Burbank mayor.
The music might be.
That's the Burbank mayor. Here's a mayor in Burbank. He's an Armenian mayor. Okay, this guy.
Proud, love is love.
I mean,
she's a strong warrior.
And he's like, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with some of the craziest tweets came out about this guy, which is absolutely wild when you see the GUSD.
Candace Owens has become one of the most prominent voices challenging modern woke culture. With her sharp wit, unapologetic demeanor, and deep dive into controversial topics, she has garnered both supporters and detractors.
Is that there is what's not being spoken about, well, it's definitely being spoken about on my podcast, is the growing alphabet mafia and how they are now adding letters that really just imply sexual.
To her fans, she's a beacon of common sense, calling out the excesses of political correctness, identity politics, and cancel culture. To her critics, she's a provocateur, challenging norms that many believe are necessary for progress.
Correct. It is the policies are harmful also to the people that they purport to help, and we have all of the evidence there to look at. When you artificially place a Black American into a school in which they do not belong based on their knowledge, doesn't mean that they go on to get aid. I'm sorry, did I say Congresswoman? I meant Congress menstruating person, because apparently we're no longer allowed to say women. I mean, this is so ridiculous. And here's what's really funny. She immediately cripples her own argument here, right? Her argument is that the evil GOP, they're taking away actions that women were allowed to take via abortion.
Whether one agrees with her or not, Owens has undeniably carved out a niche for herself in the discourse on woke culture, tearing apart its foundations in ways that demand attention.
So women, and this is also women, no, women are women. If you cannot enter a debate about abortion and even identify what it means to be a woman, you have no place in that debate.
In her various public appearances, books, and social media commentary, Candace Owens consistently argues that woke culture undermines personal responsibility, distorts facts, and encourages a victim mentality. She believes that many of the issues being championed by woke activists, particularly in relation to race, gender, and politics, are misguided, harmful, and rooted in a flawed understanding of history and societal dynamics.
There's a bunch of white people and a woman in a monkey mask taking a swing at his security and throwing eggs at Larry Elder. Classy.
Yeah, I've seen this, and it's absolutely infuriating. I know Larry Elder. He's a friend. He's a mentor.
Owens argues that this culture of outrage is stifling debate, promoting division, and ultimately working against the very goals of equality and unity that its proponents claim to uphold. Candace Owens wasn't always the conservative firebrand she is today. In fact, she started out as a liberal, even working for an anti-Trump marketing company. But her views began to shift as she observed the increasing emphasis on identity politics within the Democratic Party and the broader left. This transformation culminated in her creation of the YouTube series Red Pill Black, where she discussed her newfound conservative views and called out the dangers of woke culture. From there, her profile exploded, with appearances on major conservative platforms, debates with liberal commentators, and the publication of her book, Blackout: How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from the Democratic Plantation. Owens often critiques what she sees as a dangerous ideological conformity on the left, where anyone who questions the prevailing narrative risks being ostracized. She points to her own experiences as a Black woman who has been vilified for not adhering to the expectations placed on her by left-wing activists. Owens argues that woke culture pressures individuals to conform to a particular set of beliefs based on their race, gender, or sexual orientation, rather than encouraging them to think for themselves. A key aspect of Candace Owens's critique of woke culture is her rejection of the victim mentality she believes it perpetuates, particularly in Black communities. She has repeatedly stated that systemic racism is overblown and that personal responsibility and individual agency are the keys to success, regardless of one's race. According to Owens, woke culture emphasizes external factors such as racism, sexes to explain the challenges people face, rather than encouraging people to look inward and take control of their own lives. For example, Owens has criticized the Black Lives Matter movement, accusing it of promoting a narrative of victimhood and division. She has argued that the movement focuses too much on police brutality, which she contends is not the primary issue affecting Black Americans. Instead, she points to issues like family breakdown, crime rates, and education as more pressing concerns. By focusing on these factors, Owens believes that individuals and communities can make meaningful progress, rather than waiting for systemic change that may never come. Owens also takes issue with the idea that people should be judged primarily by their identity. In her view, woke culture places too much emphasis on race, gender, and other characteristics, rather than focusing on an individual's actions, character, and abilities. She argues that this obsession with identity politics undermines meritocracy and fosters resentment between different groups. Candace Owens is also a staunch defender of free speech, which she believes is under attack by woke culture. She argues that the increasing prevalence of cancel culture, where individuals are publicly shamed, boycotted, or even fired for expressing unpopular opinions, is a dangerous trend that stifles debate and undermines democracy. Owens has herself been a target of cancel culture, facing protests and boycotts for her views, but she remains undeterred in her commitment to speaking out against what she sees as the authoritarian tendencies of the woke left. Owens's defense of free speech extends to controversial figures and ideas. She has been criticized for defending public figures who have made offensive remarks or expressed politically incorrect opinions, but Owens maintains that all speech, even speech that is offensive or unpopular, deserves protection. In her view, the answer to bad speech is not to silence it, but to counter it with better arguments. Owens also warns that the suppression of free speech is not just a threat to conservatives, but to society as a whole. When people are afraid to speak their minds, she argues, it becomes impossible to have honest conversations about important issues. This, in turn, leads to a breakdown in trust and understanding between different groups, as people retreat into ideological echo chambers and avoid engaging with those who hold opposing views. Beyond free speech, Candace Owens argues that woke culture is having a detrimental effect on society at large. She points to the increasing polarization in politics and the growing sense of division between different groups as evidence that woke culture is driving people apart rather than bringing them together. According to Owens, the emphasis on identity politics and victimhood fosters a sense of grievance and entitlement, which leads to resentment and conflict. Owens is particularly critical of the way woke culture has infiltrated institutions like academia, the media, and corporate America. She argues that these institutions have become dominated by left-wing ideologies and that dissenting voices are often silenced or marginalized. This, she believes, is contributing to a dangerous homogeneity of thought, where only certain viewpoints are considered acceptable, and those who challenge the status quo are punished. In her speeches and interviews, Owens often highlights examples of how woke culture has manifested in real-world policies and practices. She points to the rise of diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives in schools and workplaces as an example of how woke culture is being institutionalized. While proponents of DEI argue that these initiatives promote fairness and equality, Owens contends that they often result in reverse discrimination and undermine meritocracy. Another central theme in Candace Owens's critique of woke culture is the rejection of objective truth. She argues that woke activists often prioritize feelings and personal narratives over facts and evidence, which leads to distorted views of reality. Owens has been particularly outspoken on issues related to gender and biological sex, criticizing the push for gender-neutral language and the inclusion of transgender athletes in women's sports. Owens has stated that the rejection of biological reality in favor of subjective identities is emblematic of a broader trend in woke culture, where truth is seen as relative and fluid. She argues that this relativism is dangerous, as it undermines the foundation foundations of rational discourse and scientific inquiry. According to Owens, when people are no longer able to agree on basic facts, it becomes impossible to have productive discussions or find solutions to societal problems. Candace Owens also argues that woke culture is contributing to a mental health crisis, particularly among young people. She points to the rise in anxiety, depression, and suicide rates as evidence that woke culture is promoting a sense of helplessness and despair. Owens believes that the constant focus on identity politics, victimhood, and systemic oppression is leading young people to feel overwhelmed and powerless rather than empowered to take control of their own lives. Owens has also criticized the increasing tendency to pathologize normal emotions and behaviors, arguing that woke culture encourages people to view themselves as victims of trauma rather than as individuals capable of overcoming challenges. She believes that this mindset is ultimately harmful, as it prevents people from developing the resilience and grit needed to succeed in life. Despite her sharp critiques of woke culture, Candace Owens is not without hope for the future. She believes that the excesses of woke culture will eventually lead to a backlash, as more and more people become fed up with the stifling atmosphere of political correctness and cancel culture. Owens sees signs of this backlash already, pointing to the growing popularity of conservative voices, particularly among younger generations. Owens also advocates for a return to traditional values such as personal responsibility, hard work, and respect for free speech. She believes that these values, rather than the divisive ideologies of woke culture, are the keys to building a more just and equitable society. By promoting these values, Owens hopes to inspire a new generation of leaders who will reject the victim mentality and embrace the principles of individual liberty and meritocracy. In conclusion, Candace Owens has made it her mission to dismantle woke culture by exposing its contradictions and highlighting its negative impact on society. Through her critiques of identity politics, victimhood, cancel culture, and the rejection of objective truth, Owens has positioned herself as a leading voice in the fight against the excesses of political correctness. While her views are certainly controversial, there is no denying that Owens has sparked a much-needed conversation about the future of free speech, personal responsibility, and the direction of modern culture.